This story begins 2 years ago in my hometown. There was a house, an old, forgotten place that had been abandoned for nearly 2 decades. It was nestled deep in the woods, hidden from view, and over time, nature had reclaimed it. The driveway was overgrown, the windows were broken, and the roof sagged under the weight of neglect. No one wanted to buy it, and eventually, everyone forgot it existed. But I never did. I've always been drawn to abandoned places. There's something hauntingly beautiful about them. The way time stands still, the stories they hold. So one afternoon when I had some time off work, I decided to explore it. I packed a small backpack with essentials, a flashlight, a water bottle, and my phone. Normally, I'd bring friends along for these adventures, but this house was so close to home, and it didn't seem as intimidating as other places we'd explored. I figured I'd be in and out in no time. The walk to the house was eerie. The driveway was barely visible, covered in tall grass and weeds. I had to push through branches and vines, my flashlight cutting through the dim light of the late afternoon. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. The sounds of the town faded, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird. It felt like stepping into another world. When I finally reached the house, I paused to take it in. It was a 2-story wooden structure, weathered and worn. The paint had peeled away, revealing gray, rotting wood. The windows were shattered, and the front door hung slightly ajar. I approached cautiously, peering through one of the broken windows. The inside was dark and silent. I listened for a moment, making sure I was alone, before heading to the front door. The door creaked as I pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty house. The air inside was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew was overwhelming. The living room was a time capsule of the past. An old, torn-up sofa sat in the corner, covered in a layer of dust. Picture frames lay shattered on the floor, their images faded and unrecognizable. I moved slowly, my flashlight illuminating the decay around me. The floorboards groaned under my weight, and I could feel the instability of the structure. I made my way through the first floor, taking in the remnants of the lives that had once filled this space. There was an old kitchen with rusted appliances, a dining room with a table still set for a meal that never happened, and a hallway lined with empty picture hooks. It was haunting, but I couldn't look away. Eventually, I decided to head upstairs. The staircase was narrow and creaky, each step feeling like it might give way at any moment. The second floor was even more unsettling. There were 2 rooms, one with its door wide open and the other closed. I checked the open room first. It was empty, save for a few broken pieces of furniture. The closed door, however, gave me pause. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob before deciding to leave it alone. As I turned to head back downstairs, I heard a loud thud from below. My heart skipped a beat. The sound didn't seem natural. It was too deliberate, too heavy. I froze, listening intently. The house was silent again, but the unease lingered. I hurried down the stairs, my flashlight darting around the room. Everything looked the same, but something felt off. That's when I noticed the front door. It was shut. I had left it wide open. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked or bolted from the outside. Panic set in. Someone else was here. I ran to the broken window I had peered through earlier and climbed out, scraping my arm on the jagged glass in the process. I didn't stop to look back. I sprinted into the woods, my heart pounding in my chest. As I ran, I saw flashing red and blue lights in the distance. 2 police cars were making their way down the overgrown driveway, their headlights cutting through the trees. I ducked behind a tree, watching as they pulled up to the house. I didn't stick around to see what happened next. I ran all the way home, my mind racing with questions. Who had locked me in? Why were the police there? I never found out. The incident was never reported in the news, and the house was demolished a few months later. To this day, I wonder what or who was in that house with me. The decommissioned factory. Fast forward to 2016. I was living with my 2 best friends, Jason and Andrew, in an apartment in the city. We were all in our final year of college, juggling classes and part-time jobs, so our free time was limited. But when we did have a day off, we loved exploring. Hiking trails, abandoned buildings, random towns, you name it, we'd done it. One weekend, we all had Friday and Saturday off, and we were itching for an adventure. Andrew had heard about a decommissioned factory on the outskirts of the city. It sounded like the perfect place to explore. None of us had ever been to a place like that before, so we were equal parts excited and nervous. After some debate, we decided to go for it. We drove to the edge of the city in Jason's car. The factory was located in a flat, desolate area where the urban landscape abruptly gave way to empty fields. We didn't have an exact address, but we found it on Google Maps using satellite view. We parked at a gas station a block away and walked the rest. The street was eerily quiet, no cars, no people, just the sound of the wind rustling through the grass. The factory was massive, its exterior covered in rusted metal and graffiti. The chain-link fence surrounding it had barbed wire on top, but in several spots, it had been cut open. Clearly, we weren't the first to explore this place. We crawled through one of the gaps and made our way to the front door, which was already slightly ajar. As soon as we stepped inside, I felt a chill run down my spine. The building was swaying slightly, the metal creaking and groaning in the wind. The only light came from our flashlights, which cast long shadows across the rusted machinery. The main room was filled with massive, hulking machines, their purpose long forgotten. Narrow pathways wound between them, creating a maze-like environment. We stuck together at first, wandering through the room and taking in the eerie atmosphere. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I ventured off on my own. I found a hallway leading deeper into the factory and decided to explore it. Before I went too far, I glanced over my shoulder and saw one of my friends not far behind me. I couldn't tell if it was Jason or Andrew, but I figured they saw me, so I kept going. The hallway led to another room, this one filled with conveyor belts and catwalks. I was shining my flashlight around when I heard the door behind me open and close. I called out to my friends, but when I turned around, no one was there. The hallway was empty. My heart started to race. I was about to head back when I heard a noise behind me, a soft crumble, like someone stepping on debris. I turned my flashlight toward the sound and froze. Standing a few feet away was a man. He was disheveled, with long, matted hair and a wild look in his eyes. Before I could react, he lunged at me. I slammed the door shut and ran, calling out to Jason and Andrew. They heard the panic in my voice and came running. We didn't stop until we were back at the car, our hearts pounding. On the drive home, I told them what had happened. Whoever that man was, he had been waiting for me to split off from the group. What he would have done, I don't know. But I'm grateful I didn't find out. We never went back to that factory, and to this day, I can't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in there. The creepy church. This final story takes us back nearly 5 years to when I was in high school. My best friend at the time was a guy named Colton. We were inseparable, always looking for something to do. One day, right after winter break had started, we were bored out of our minds. We'd spent the day playing Xbox at his place, but by evening, we were itching to get out of the house. Our town had a creepy, abandoned church at the end of a deserted road. It had been abandoned for as long as I could remember, and it was the subject of countless local legends. As kids, we were terrified of it, but now, for some reason, I was more curious than scared. So, when we happened to pass by the road leading to the church, we decided to check it out. It was already dark, but the moon was bright enough to light our way. The road was in terrible condition, cracked and overgrown with vines and bushes. By the time we reached the church, we couldn't even see the street we'd come from. The church itself looked like it had been swallowed by the forest. The fence around the courtyard was barely recognizable, covered in tall plants. We made our way through a broken section of the fence and approached the large entrance door. The door creaked loudly as we pushed it open, the sound echoing through the building. Inside, the church was eerily untouched. The rows of benches were still intact, and there was no debris or graffiti, which was unusual for an abandoned place. We stepped inside and slowly walked down the aisle, our footsteps echoing in the vast space. As we got closer to the podium at the front, we heard a sudden thud that echoed throughout the church. We both jumped and pulled out our phone flashlights, but we couldn't find the source of the noise. Colton thought he saw another room near the entrance, so we headed over to check it out. The room was filled with stacked chairs and boxes, like a storage area. While we were in there, we heard footsteps, light thumps that sounded like someone walking down the aisle we had just come from. We froze, staring out the thin crack in the doorway. Then, for a split second, we saw someone cross through the darkness and exit the front door. The footsteps stopped, and the door creaked shut. We waited in fear for several minutes before sprinting out of the church and down the deserted road. We didn't stop running until we were back on the main street. To this day, I don't know who was in the church or where they came from. They had to have been hiding somewhere near the podium, but there were no doorways in that area. It's a mystery that still haunts me. These experiences have stayed with me over the years, each one a reminder of how quickly curiosity can turn to fear. Abandoned places hold a certain allure, but they also hide dangers, both seen and unseen. I've learned to trust my instincts and to never underestimate the unknown. Whether it's an old house, a forgotten factory, or a creepy church, there's always more to the story than meets the eye. And sometimes, it's better to leave those stories untold.